Just one step to begin the road to recovery from gambling addiction. And reflecting back in my own personal experience, in the 23 years I was gambling, I never once thought about making a phone call to get help. And then once I crossed that line into disorder gambling, the only thing I could think to do was chase my losses. I couldn't fathom the idea of having to accept my losses and reconstruct my life. So the greatest advice I can give to anyone, that believes their gambling may be becoming a problem for whatever reason they're gambling, whether it's to escape life's problems or because they think it's a financial solution, is to get help right away. If they call 1-800-GAMBLER, they'll connect them with one of us, and we can introduce them to a lot of amazing resources that are available within the state of Maryland today, and to a whole new life. It gets so much better once we stop making the problem a solution.
The recovery journey may not always be smooth, but neither is addiction. I would choose the recovery journey over addiction any day. It takes a lot of hard work and dedication, but it is possible to find your path to recovery and get your life back.
Ever been really miserable or depressed, deflated, and everyone around you is laughing and goofing off and having a great time, and you think to yourself, they just have no idea. They just have no idea. Well, turned out that they were the only ones who did have an idea, who did understand me. And I surrounded myself with these people that were in recovery from problem gambling. And they helped me and held me up when I couldn't do it myself. They gave me support, they gave me love, they gave me knowledge of how you do this thing called recovery. It was incredible. Finally, I was with my own kind, with my own people, and I could see that there was a way up and a way out of this horrible mess that I'd gotten myself into.
Some people are able to choose their own paths through life, but I believe this path was chosen for me. Through my own recovery, I can now share my life experiences in order to help those struggling with addiction find their own paths to wellness. I remember I was going to go for broke by saving a large sum of money to gamble with, and through recovery, I did save that money, but not for gambling. I decided to buy camera equipment and classes to start my own photography business. Then another path opened, and I decided to walk that path. And here I am, living a dream next to the ocean, taking pictures of wildlife and landscapes and helping people find their own paths to recovery. Life couldn't be better.
Gambling gave me my wings, but took away my sky. And when everything came crashing down, I thought my life was over. Little did I know that it had just begun. I found recovery. I've done the work. I do what I say I'm going to do, and I'm where I say I'm going to be when I'm going to be there. I've got a life to live instead of a sentence to serve, and there's nothing for me that feels better. I'm trusted again. People believe me. I don't live behind a veil of secrecy. I love my life today. I wouldn't trade it for anything.
It takes just one step to begin the road to recovery from gambling addiction. In my case, it had to be a divine intervention because I refused to believe there was any other way but to chase my losses and gamble my way out of the financial mess I created for myself. It doesn't have to be that way. Cut your losses, make the phone call to 1-800-GAMBLER, and talk to someone with lived experience that can offer you a new solution. Whether it's an escape, it takes your mind off your problems, or if it's a financial solution, it just may be a problem. So make that phone call today and speak with someone that's been there and that can offer you a new solution to life. Help and hope is always available, no matter how bad it's gotten.
So what a great testament of recovery from all of our peers here at the center. The video is also available for free if you want to contact the center for more awareness materials. I also want to say thank you so far to our morning presenters, and I'm really looking forward to the afternoon. So I'm Kristen Bell, and I'm the clinical manager here at the center. We've had a slight change to our panel today as Kenny's not feeling well. So Mr. Will Hinman, our center peer, will be speaking on and sharing his story. And I'm also here to moderate any questions that you might have, and they'll be answered at the end of everyone's share. So I'm really grateful today to host today's recovery panel, where we'll hear stories of recovery from Byron, Ellen, and Will. Please allow me to introduce our panelists. Byron is a grateful, recovering alcoholic and compulsive gambler. Raised in Buffalo, New York, Byron was previously a practicing attorney and a public relations consultant, representing foreign individuals and entities in Washington, D.C. His personal plunge into the depths of disordered substance use and gambling led him to a suspension from practicing law and a short stay in federal prison. Yet Byron's recovery has been a blessing by pointing him in a new direction, a life where he advocates for returning citizens and helps those who struggle with addictions. His unique lived experience with addiction and being a former attorney has allowed him to write and travel, sharing his life journey with others. Ellen is a grateful woman in recovery. As the mother of a child with a gambling problem, she sought the assistance from Gam-Anon. Ellen reaches out to assist others who struggle when someone they love has a problem with gambling. She takes great satisfaction in giving back the miracle of recovery that was shared with her. Ellen was a high school teacher and a marketing professional and reports after selling products, the hardest sale is a lesson of the day to a room full of teenagers who have no interest. Ellen is a loving mother, sister, friend, and in her husband's words, the perfect wife. Her greatest joy comes from spending time with her grandchildren and sharing the miracle of recovery. Will is a certified peer recovery support specialist with the Center of Excellence on Problem Gambling. As a peer, Will assists Marylanders struggling with a gambling problem or addiction navigate recovery treatment resources and helps individuals remove any barriers to recovery. Will uses his background of over 25 years in customer service and management to help aid his passion for working with people. He tries to help others on the path to a new way of life by sharing his own personal lived experiences, strengths, and hopes of life and recovery one day at a time. And so without further ado, I'm going to pass it off to Byron.
Hi, my name is Byron Fogan, and as described, I am a former attorney. I am a grateful, recovering alcoholic and compulsive gambler, although I know that term is falling out of use. Still what I like to call myself. I'm a person living in recovery, and you know, my life today is a joy. It's an unmitigated joy where I am not a slave to addictions that I practiced for years. Before I get started, I want to say two things. Number one, I want to thank Victor for his wonderful presentation. What he shared are thoughts that I think about all the time, but as a person in recovery, I might not necessarily be the best messenger for those thoughts. It was just very, very inspirational to hear him talk about some of the things that lead people to addiction, although none of those were factors in my life, and what led me to addiction and ultimately to recovery. But I was very happy and really galvanized by listening to his words. And as I go out and do the work that I do in the recovery space, I'm uplifted to know that there are folks like him with those kinds of ideas helping support what I'm trying to do in my recovery journey. So that's first. Secondly, you're going to hear a celebration, at least in my story, and I believe in everybody's story. You're going to hear a celebration of what recovery looks like and how my life was changed for the better. And that's beautiful. And and I'm certainly glad for it. And I think there's a lot of people who love me and care about me who are also glad for it. Certainly society is probably glad for it because I'm no longer a menace. But I do want to take a moment at the beginning just to acknowledge and give awareness to the fact that, you know, in my journey in addiction, there are some people that were irreparably harmed. So I'm going to talk a lot about how the joy of my life and how things have gotten so much better. But while I'm doing that, I also want to acknowledge that there are people whose lives were irreparably changed because of my behavior and my conduct as an active addict. And while I'm celebrating, you know, coming up on 9 years of recovery, you know, some of those people who are part of the wreckage that I left behind in my journey in addiction, they'll never be the same. And irrespective of how great my life gets, they may have their own suffering and their own struggles. And as I celebrate my success, I want to acknowledge that they have a journey that there's nothing I can do to solve. A problem gambling session and a recovery from problem gambling session. I did not gamble long. I placed my first bet when I was a freshman in college, and I am a wild and radical Bills fan. I love the Buffalo Bills. And when I was a freshman in college, the Buffalo Bills had made their first Super Bowl ever. And I was so excited. We were playing the New York Giants, and we beat the New York Giants during the regular season. I remember all these games like they happened yesterday. And I took a tuition refund check, and I said, "Wow, this is the safest bet ever." Right? Never placed a bet up until that point. Took a tuition refund check, cashed it out, placed a bet, and the Bills lost on a field goal try that was wide right. It was the worst thing that had ever happened to me. I called my father. I had to get help getting my finances rearranged. I was 18 years old. I don't even think I turned 19 yet. I was 18 years old, and lost like $900, which was just a miraculous amount of money. That was terrible. And so I thought, wow, you know, I lost this. I had to go through all this problem. It messed up my family's trust in me. There were all kinds of things that happened as a result of me losing this little $900. And I thought, wow, my gambling problem is solved. I'll never place a bet again. And I didn't for years and years and years and years and years. But by the time I was in college, and it's really important because these two stories weave themselves within one another. By the time I was in college, I was already a practicing alcoholic. I took my first drink at age 14. I drank alcoholically from the first time I took a drink, and I won't focus so much on that, except so much of my alcoholism is weaved into how I ultimately became an active compulsive gambler. So I'm just sharing this as background. I took my first drink at 14. I drank alcoholically from the first time I drank. I never have taken a social drink in my life. Not once did I take a drink just for the calm and ease of it. I took a drink with the intention of becoming insanely and blindly drunk. It was my solution to all of my problems of insecurity, all of my problems of not feeling like I fit in. Alcohol was my solution to that, and alcohol led to other substances. I spent years and years and years in the grip of a raging alcohol addiction. By the time I was in college, I was certainly in the throes of that. And when I placed that first bet on the Super Bowl in 1991, I was deeply in the throes of my own alcohol addiction. However, in parallel to being a raging alcoholic, I was also a pretty successful student. in high school, I did really well. I got great grades. School was another one of my escapes, which is weird that I put those two things together, both alcohol and school. I loved the process of education. I loved being competitive in the classroom. It's a space that I always felt comfortable. And things went really well, right? My ability to achieve in the classroom really hid how insanely drunk I was and how sick I really was. It hid depression, it hid anxieties, it hid everything, because once you put me in a classroom and you told me you were going to evaluate me on what I was able to write on a piece of paper, I was in my wheelhouse. I love that. And up until about my third year of college, it was still easy for me to do that. It wasn't until the third year of college, and I was in my second semester of my third year, where my desire to drink got in the way of my competitiveness in the classroom. It was the first time where I experienced that. And my alcoholism overtook my ability and my need to compete in the classroom. And in fact, I stopped going to class, period. I didn't go at all. And my school excused me after getting a like 0.6 GPA that semester. I showed up to an exam for a class that I had not taken, and I thought, absolutely, I'm going to be able to pass because I'm smart. It doesn't work out that way. My school asked me to leave. I went to a really good undergraduate institution, and I took a year off, and I really just learned how to use the substances of my choice and still attend to my daily routine. I learned how to get over a hangover really quick. I learned how to get drunk really early in the day and pass out early enough at night so I could wake up in the morning. I learned all kinds of coping strategies on how I was going to live life as an active alcoholic and addict, and still attend to my daily affairs. And I went back to school. They let me back in about a year later. I completed my undergraduate degree and I started my life. I got married, I started a family, I did all the kinds of things that a normal human being does. But as I was building this life, I was building a life that did two things. Number one, I was building a life that allowed me to drink the way I wanted to drink. And I was building a life that also required me to drink the way I wanted to drink, which are two different things. So the allowed part is I found somebody who would, I married somebody who was going to take care of our responsibilities in the household. She was she was the type of person who had everything in order, right? And I found somebody who was going to help me do that. She was going to take care of all of these things, all of these responsibilities. And then I could drink the way I wanted to drink, right? All I needed to do was bring home my paycheck and everything would be fine. Family life doesn't work that way, but that's the way my alcoholic brain thought. And then as things got bad, right? Because things got bad very quick. Then I had a great excuse in order to go drink the way I wanted to drink, right? So on the one hand, I had a life that allowed me to, and I had a life that required me to. I had all the good that allowed me to. I had a job, I had a good education, I had a house and all the rest of the things, so I could party the way I wanted to. And then I had all the misery of bad relationships that alcoholics create, and all the misery that a bad job will create, because the bad job was bad because I wasn't showing up. I wasn't doing the kinds of things I needed to do, but I had a great excuse to be able to undertake my addiction exactly the way I wanted to. And I did that for years, right? I ended up getting divorced in that first marriage. And again, my divorce gave me another excuse to drink the way I wanted to drink. Throughout this whole process, I ended up going back to school, and I went to law school. And Law school was wonderful. I loved it there. My competitive juices were really flowing. And the other great thing about law school is, anybody who knows about it, you really have to pass one test every semester, right? I had to be on once a semester. Yeah, I had to attend the classes and I had to open the books and do the readings, but I was really able to execute my life any old way I wanted to during law school. And I really only had to be on once for every one of my 5 classes per semester. And that was perfect for an alcoholic like me, because really I was able to dry out for just a little bit, pass my classes, and I did wonderfully well during law school. It was also very clear to me that there's no way that I was going to be an effective lawyer without building a life in the same way I did after college, which allowed me to drink the way I wanted to, which meant I needed a new wife. I needed somebody else who was going to take care of my responsibilities, but I also needed a life that required me to drink the way I wanted to. The life of a lawyer is pretty stressful. So I got remarried, and I remarried the same woman who I married the first time. And all the same problems were there, but she was also still the same rock that she was the first time too. And life went on that way for a long time. I was still a raging alcoholic. I made great money. I was a pretty good attorney. I certainly had a great reputation as an attorney, and I was compensated at a pretty high level considering who I worked for and the business that I did. But I still drank like a pig. I drank like a horrible person. And I knew that my run of drinking was coming soon to a close. My wife, I guess she probably got sick of me just being in the house. So she sent me on vacation. She did not want to go, and she did not send my son with me. She sent me on vacation to Puerto Rico, and sometime in 2010. This was after years of tolerating my insane behavior as an alcoholic. And I ended up staying at a hotel that was an extremely nice and beautiful hotel, but I couldn't think of anything else to do but go down to the bar and get drunk. And I said, well, I can't just do that on my vacation. I saw the entrance to a casino right next to the bar in the hotel, and I strolled in with $300. And that was the start of my descent into a horrible life of compulsive gambling, problem gambling, disordered gambling conduct. That ultimately led me to commit crimes, to become an absolute menace in society. I won the first night. I remember winning, and I remember that feeling of winning. And I was like, oh, this is the greatest thing on earth. Shoot, I don't even have to be a lawyer anymore. Being a lawyer is hard. This was easy, right? I made the same amount of money in a couple of hours in the casino that I would have had to work hours for as a practicing attorney. It was great. It was the greatest thing that I could have thought of. I bought my wife some gifts, and I bought my son some gifts, and I came home like Santa Claus from this vacation, just renewed, filled with the spirit of hope. Like, this is going to be great. I'm going to be the greatest dad. I'm going to be the greatest husband because I found gambling, and I can go make lots of money and everybody will be happy with me. It didn't last long. It lasted longer than it should, because honestly, for the first several times I gambled, I kept on winning. I always won. That's I don't think I would have done it had I not won in the first instance. I probably would have stopped. Maybe. Who knows? That God's plan is God's plan. But there came a point where I had won so much, and then one day I lost. Oh my God, I can't even. I try not to put dollar amounts on it because it doesn't make any sense. And as our previous speaker spoke about, like, just knowing that it's bad isn't going to help anybody. So knowing the amount isn't going to help anybody. But I lost an incredible amount of money in one day. And I walked away without having even the ability to get money off a credit card. I couldn't get money anymore. I lost that much money in one day. And I said, wow, there's no way I can get this money back just working. There's only one way I can get this money back, and it's in the casino. It's only one way. I lost all my money to the casino, but there's only one way to get it back, and that's through the casino. And there was this nagging thought in my head over and over again that, you know, the only way you'll get this money back is through the casino. The only way you get this money back through the casino. It felt like it was playing on a loudspeaker in my head over and over and over again, to the place where I finally said, all right, I yelled back to the voice, like, all right, well, how am I going to get money to go to the casino to make it back? And, you know, like I did so many times before I was about to make a mistake or make a bad decision, I got drunk. And I got drunk enough that it made good sense for me to transfer money out of a trust that I was that I was in charge of as an attorney. It was my client's trust. I managed a private charitable foundation for him, and I transferred money directly into a casino cage. I said, okay, well, I'm going to get this money back. I'll go gamble. I'll get this money back. I'll get the other money back I lost, and then I'll put all the money back and no one will know the difference. That didn't work. But it started a spiral for about 2 years where I embezzled millions of dollars from this trust account. And bear in mind, the trust was provided to me by the person who at that time had been my best friend in life. And ultimately, I kept doing that. I kept taking little bits of money and big bits of money out of that trust for ages. Go to the casino, I'd lose it. Go to the casino, I'd lose it. Go to the casino and win huge amounts of money and give it all back to the casino. This happened over and over again for approximately 2 years. During that time, I was visited by the FBI, who was wondering what the hell I was doing with all of this money, where I was getting it from, did I have any authorization to spend it, even being visited by the FBI. I was visiting the FBI in February of 2013. I continued my activities, including the embezzlement, for another 6 months, even being knowingly under investigation by the FBI. Every day, that sound in my head that I talked about would keep ringing and keep screaming at me, saying the only solution is the casino. The only solution to this problem is the casino. The only solution is for you to go to the casino and you to make back every dime of this millions of dollars that you lost. And ultimately, there came a day where I just ran out of rope. I didn't have any more energy for it. I couldn't do it anymore. All of my addictions had conspired to turn me into an antisocial criminal that I didn't even know or recognize anymore, and I was done. There's more to say about how that happened, but I don't want to bore you with that part. The part that's amazing is that I ran across a fellowship of men and women through the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous and the rooms of Gamblers Anonymous, who understood me, who pointed me the direction of a God of my understanding who loved me and wanted great things, and started me on a path where they supported my efforts to get clean and sober, my efforts to start making amends to the world for what I had taken from it, and my efforts to come to grips with the fact, in acceptance, that I had lived a life that caused irreparable harm to some folks. I didn't have to be that same person anymore, but there may be absolutely nothing I can do to change what has happened in the past. And the only thing I was able to do is, surrounded in love, turn my attention to the wreckage of my past that I had created and start slowly, one by one, bit by bit, addressing the things that I had done over the course of 27 years of active addiction, some of which, a large portion of which, towards the end, involved my gambling. The only way I would have found recovery is through the first word of the first step of 12-step programs. And the first word of the first step is we. I would have never been able to do this on my own. On my own, the only alternatives that I saw were to keep going to the casino or to kill myself. There was no other alternative that Byron Fogan, saw. The alternatives I were given all were from the we of recovery. The daily support of the people who I was surrounded with in recovery, who kept saying it will get better. They didn't say it would get great. They just said it would get better. And it was that hope every day, even today, 9 years in, as I'm still spending lots of time cleaning up the wreckage of my past. Even today, it's that little piece of hope, from the people that I'm surrounded with in recovery that makes me get up and try it again today, without the use of drugs, alcohol, or problem gambling. That's my story. I hope people talk deeper about recovery, but I wanted to explain to you like what it feels like to be an addict. It is a bullhorn in your head telling you these are the solutions. These are the only solutions, which are the same things that are causing you all your damn problems. So I'm grateful to be able to present here. Sometimes I'm kind of overwhelmed about being the face of recovery, because I don't feel like that. I feel like it's the we. I wish there were thousands of people who've helped me find my recovery, who were standing behind me, telling their stories. Because the honest to God truth is, it's no one individual face that's the face of recovery. It's thousands and millions of people working together to overcome this wild and brutal illness and problem, and do so in a way that's sometimes facing pretty huge stigmas in the world. Yeah, I'm really happy to be here. I'm glad to be able to talk to people about recovery and talk to people about addiction. And I thank God for giving me the strength to share my story. So thank you.
Thank you, Byron, for such a great share. I'm going to pass it over to Ellen.
Well, Byron, I got to follow that. Thank you. Before I begin, I want to thank Mary Drexler and the Maryland Center for Excellence on Problem Gambling for inviting me and trusting me with these minutes. I also want to thank Kristen for putting up with my lack of technical expertise and making me laugh. So without further ado, good morning. My name is Ellen W., and I am the mother of a problem gambler, a very grateful member of Gam-Anon, and a recovering enabler. How did I get to this point, you might wonder? My journey has been a long and convoluted one, as most are. I invite you to come on this journey with me, from devastation to hope, one mother's journey. I'm breaking it up into 3 different portions. The first part is the realization that there is a problem in my life. A few things that will come up: a puzzle without pictures. What is going on here? What do these things mean? A deer in the headlights. And what now? The beginning. How and when did the realization hit me that my son might have a gambling problem? Truth be told, it wasn't one thing like a light bulb moment. It was more like bits and pieces of events that gelled together to create an awareness that there might be a problem. And it took a while. Trying to figure out what was wrong was like being forced to put together a huge jigsaw puzzle without instructions and no pictures. You don't know what you have, just random events that don't fit together correctly and do not create a pattern or picture. Any attempt to ask questions or discuss events with my beautiful boy was met with double talk, no answers, walking out of the room in a huff, and sometimes hostility. Puzzle piece 1, just for reference. When Scott was in high school, the guys would get together and play poker on Friday nights. No red flags, just the recall of these poker games that they all seemed to enjoy when other events emerged for me a few years later. Puzzle piece 2. Scott is in school in Washington, D.C., and my credit card arrives 1 month after another. And there are rental car charges. Now, he's in D.C. What does he need a rental car for? When I asked the question, his answer is that some of his friends and he went to Atlantic City a few times. Don't worry, Mom. I'll pay you back, he says. Some double talk followed with running of the mouth to shut down discussion. Puzzle piece 3. New Year's Eve, sometime later. Scott is home in New York with us. All of a sudden at 6 p.m., he tells his stepfather and me he's leaving. Oh, I say, you and the guys going out early? No, he replies, I'm going to Uncasville, Connecticut to Mohegan's Sun, 2.5-hour drive. Before I go out with them, my husband and I were dumbfounded, and he left. Definitely not normal. Puzzle piece 4, different year. There was the 3.5 to 4-hour drive to Turning Stone Casino in upstate New York, during which time he got a speeding ticket for driving 94 miles per hour on the New York State Thruway. Puzzle piece 5 and on. I find multiple branded casino-looking credit cards and comp tickets scattered in his bedroom. He was not always his friendly, happy self. He was secretive. He was often argumentative, manipulative, much more often than previous. Clearly, something wasn't right, but what? His life didn't revolve around playing a round of his beloved golf the way it used to. He wasn't always looking to hang with his close friends from high school when he was home. He seemed preoccupied with something. It was all beginning to look suspicious. What did all these pieces mean? I felt like a deer in the headlights. Part 2, navigating the problem. Oh my God, could my son be a gambler? What do I do now? How do I stop this? How do I deal with my shame? Where do I get help? How do I live my life with no hope? Part 2, the middle, navigating the problem. Once it began to dawn on me and my husband that all this behavior might be foretelling of something ominous, it's hard to recall how much denial was sprinkled into my thinking. Did I pay for stuff? Did I fix things? Of course I did. I'm a mother, which is also to say that I'm a fixer, which of course translates to I'm an enabler. Those things do not die easily. Stay tuned. I'm going to address this in a bit. Once we thought that gambling might be a problem, I confided in my closest family. The pain, the shame were overwhelming and debilitating for me. My son was now in his senior year of college. My husband, close family, and I planned an intervention in DC to let him know that we're all on the same page and had looked into a private gambling rehab program as soon as he graduated. We were clear in telling him that we loved him and that we were all united in getting him the help he needed. He was adamant. He didn't have a problem, and he would tell us when he needed help. He could handle it. My husband and I did enroll him in this private 4-week rehab program run by a PhD doctor who credited herself with having over 30 successful years working with problem gamblers. We needed to turn this young man over to professionals. For the first time in years, there was some relief and hope that they knew what they were doing and would have some success with our beloved boy. Toward the end of the third week, I was invited to an hour session with my son and the PhD who runs the program. 3/4 of the way through the session, she asked him what he wanted to do with his life. His answer, "Oh, I know, I want to be a professional poker dealer." Well, certainly you can understand my shock after 3 weeks in this intensive rehab program. But her answer was the massive shocker. "That's nice," she said. "What? That's nice?" I did all I could to keep myself civil. I was clearly displeased by her acceptance. It didn't come as a total surprise that within 2 days he was invited to leave the program. Now we had a problem. He had no job, no place to live, no recovery. My husband and I were not on the same page. He was not in favor of taking him into our home, but was supportive of my wishes to do so. Life was upside down and lunacy. It was always like walking on eggshells and trying not to break any eggs. We were afraid to say or do anything that might rile him up. It was 5 months of pure hell. By January 24th, 2005, I was a broken, ashamed, despairing, hysterical, devastated, hopeless mother of a 23-year-old problem gambler. My family and I had tried multiple ways to stop this smart young man from gambling. I came into that first Gam-Anon room to find out what I could do to stop my son from ruining his life with his desire to gamble. They informed me there was nothing I could do to stop his gambling. It was not in my control. Gam-Anon was a 12-step program of recovery and hope for me. Me? What do I need a 12-step program for? I don't have a problem with gambling. And hope. What kind of hope is there if we can't stop him from gambling and destroying his life? Just keep coming back, they told me. Call us during the week if you need to talk, and keep coming back. This is a program of hope. I walked out so let down that there was no magic fix to stop my wonderful boy from this horrendous problem. How could they possibly say this was a program of hope? I did keep coming back because everything we had tried as a family had done nothing to alleviate this problem. But I certainly wasn't convinced that this was a program of hope. Something happened within my first 9 weeks of Gam-Anon. Those wonderful Gam-Anons assisted me to see myself as a classic enabler. I had taken my son back into my home. He had a private bedroom and bathroom, a refrigerator filled with food, television, internet access. We even loaned him a car to get to work once he found a job. And of course, we laid out some rules. We expected him to attend GA meetings during the week. We expected him to find a job. We expected him to give us some money toward room and board. Not one of our expectations were ever fulfilled. Then 2 things happened that changed it all for me. He had jeopardized the safety of our home while we were at work so he could get back in and play online poker all day. I had learned from my Gam-Anons that problem gamblers don't hit their bottoms when they have everything they need to continue their behavior. It became crystal clear for me that he had everything he needed, and our lives were miserable. I had provided him with a life of ease and in turn had enabled his desires. My husband and I were in agreement. By enabling him, he would never have the opportunity to hit his bottom. I knew what needed to be done. Did I have the strength to do it? I tell you, I was the last likely mother on earth to make her child homeless. And that is exactly what I did 9 weeks after coming into Gam-Anon. I am not advocating this for anyone else. I so desperately wanted him to seek recovery, but that wasn't in my control. I hoped that he would quickly turn to GA for recovery and that we could all work on recovery, but that was not to be. Things were beginning to come clearer in my understanding of this devastating problem. I had to let go and let God, and I was petrified. Keep coming back, they said. I had no choice. For my survival, I did keep coming back. Part 3, moving forward. What's going on today? How do I live my life now? What kind of relationship is possible with my child? Is recovery possible for me if he still has a problem? What is the role of Gam-Anon in my life? Can I have hope again? Part 3. I wanted what those Gam-Anons had. I wanted peace of mind, clarity, and courage to deal with my beloved son. I wanted to enjoy my life again with HOPE. They were throwing me a lifeline. Clearly, I would have to do the work and work the program. It was definitely a lifeline of support, fellowship, meetings, literature. I did keep coming back. I started listening more, reading the literature, talking to my Gam-Anons, and working the 12 steps. And that wasn't easy. I trusted they knew what they were talking about. Their cry was consistent. The program works. Keep coming back. It works. Have boundaries. Have hope. I couldn't control my son, but I learned that I could control Ellen. And that was life altering. They continued to share their life, their experience, strength, and hope with me. 2 or 3 years into my program, my phone rang at 2:30 in the morning. It was my son in a panic and crying. Where are you and what's wrong? I was able to say. The answer? I'm in a men's shelter in Atlantic City and I'm scared. Can you come and get me or wire me some money so I can get out of here? Despite my upset and panic at hearing this, I replied as calmly as I could and told him to call the Gamblers Anonymous hotline. I told him that I knew he could figure it out. I told him that I loved him. I hung up and cried. First thing in the morning, I called a Gam-Anon. Now, you got to understand that my response on that call would not have been possible without my fellowship and all that I had learned. Clearly, I was changing. I had never before ever understood detach with love. And that I had just done. How did I come to terms with loving my child despite the fact that he turns his back on GA and denies he has a problem? Gam-Anon has taught me that I can love those in my life and have boundaries. I've learned that loving my son includes establishing and maintaining boundaries. I've learned that if I work my program one day at a time, I will be able to function and live my best life. I've learned that I am not in control of anyone's life but my own. This simple admission is not always easy to act upon. Restraint needs to be practiced over and over again by this admitted enabler. It takes ongoing work. I am up for the job. And if I get weak in the knees, I have a structure for getting help, my program and my Gamanons. Another huge lesson that the Gamanons have taught me is that you don't ask questions if you don't know whether the answer will be the truth or a lie. Another one of those easy to say concepts, but hard to enact if you are a mother, controller, enabler. Gamanon has taught me that problem gamblers can be manipulators and liars. If this is the truth, then who's the fool for asking the questions? This concept took me a little while to enact. I was a work in progress and still am. The miracle of the Gamanons can't be underestimated. Their understanding, honesty, and hope were the prime reasons, along with my working the 12 steps of the program, for my success to change my life, despite my son's refusal to use GA for his life. Each day, I pray to my higher power that my cherished child will turn his will over to GA and his higher power for his recovery. I have also made peace with the possibility that this may not occur while I am alive. The honesty and the truth we share each week is clearly the stuff of miracles. We become mirrors for each other in faith, courage, honesty, vigilance, willingness, and yes, HOPE, as we work towards our serenity. It quickly adds up to living our best lives and sharing them together. This supportive fellowship lifeline keeps on giving to me each day of my life. I have discovered that Gamanon is the PhD program that assists me in dealing ongoingly with my problem gambler, my family, my friends, life in general, and life in specific. It assists me to live my best life and contribute to others. I came because of my problem gambler, and I stayed because I desired to live my best life. In this fellowship, I have a dedicated group of people who are there for me as a sounding board, a mirror to putting the program to work in my life, a committed fellowship to listen, to tell the truth, to keep recovery in my life, one day at a time. I will never graduate. I will keep coming back. Surely, this is a recipe for success, hope, serenity. They are correct when they say, keep coming back. It works if you work it, so work it, you're worth it. I'm proud to say at meetings all over the world, my name is Ellen, and I am a grateful member of Gamanon. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ellen, for your share. We're getting great feedback from everybody so far, and I'm going to pass it off to Will.
Hello, everyone. As you said earlier, my name is Will Hinman. I am a certified peer recovery sports specialist for the Maryland Center of Excellence on Problem Gambling, assisting individuals who wish to either limit, control, or stop their gambling behavior altogether. I'm also a person in long-term recovery for alcoholism and disorder gambling. I feel like Byron, just shared a lot of my story, and I want to start by saying what an honor it is to be on this recovery panel with Byron and Ellen. Both of them mean the world to me. I was introduced to Ellen a few years back at the National Council on Problem Gambling Conference out in Denver by a couple from New York. She just moved to Maryland, and we just hit it off from the beginning, and she never fails to pick up the phone when there's a family member in need, and always does her best to get the gambler to us when they're ready. So I'm grateful for you, Ellen. And Byron played a very vital role in my early recovery, as you'll hear in my story. And I'll be forever grateful for him, because I'm honestly not sure if I'd be sitting here today if it wasn't for him. He was the individual, because of his story with all the similarities. he gave me that little light bulb of hope to believe that recovery could work for me. So I'll try to roll through my story a little bit. Like I said, Byron shared a whole lot of it. I much like Byron, so sports were my escape as a child. I was an introvert, very uncomfortable in my own skin, and I used sports to escape. That's where I felt total freedom. The competitive nature came out, and I felt confident about myself. And I think for that reason, because I was an athlete, I really resisted drinking early in high school. When I was starting to get introduced to the parties at 14, 15, 16 years old, I wouldn't drink. I was a kid on the sidelines watching everybody else have fun. I remember I had a friend on the basketball team. He said, how come you never drink? I said, I just don't want to. And I don't know why that was. I don't know if it's because I thought it was unhealthy or if I just intuitively knew it wasn't going to be good for me. But I refused to drink in the early years of high school. And then when I was 17 years old, I was going through my first heartbreak over this girl, and my buddy said, you need a beer. And my guard was down, and I had immediately found my solution. I started drinking alcoholically pretty much the second time I went out. That first time I had a few beers. After that, I was a kid they were picking up off the ground at the end of the parties from industrial parks, tot lots, wherever we were at, they were trying to get me home, and then towards the end of my junior year in high school, I got a job at an Irish pub that taught me how to drink like a gentleman. And I ended up staying at that pub for 24 years for much of the reasons that Byron named. It allowed me to drink the way I wanted to drink. It allowed me to gamble the way I wanted to gamble. It made me feel like someone. It also gave me an excuse, much as he was talking about with the home life. It gave me an excuse through my 2 failed marriages that I could be a homemaker for my kids. I could be their home daycare provider and work nights. But the truth of the matter is, that job had become my identity. And I suffered from so much fear because I had absolutely no dreams or aspirations or confidence in myself. And I would have never sought a job where I had to publicly speak like this. This was absolutely not something I would do before recovery. As a matter of fact, I would have to get liquored up before I did a toast as the best man in a wedding. So, just to be able to stand before you today and share my story is a gift of recovery. Everything I have in my life today is a gift of recovery. But so I started drinking pretty alcoholically from day 2. Got a job in an Irish pub where I remained for many years. My parents forced me to go to college, and I managed to graduate successfully. Around my junior year in college, I was introduced to gambling. I was going to a football game. I was going to the New York Giants, Arizona Cardinals game. And a buddy of mine said, hey, you can put a bet on that game if you want to. I know a guy that'll take bets. And I knew nothing about really gambling at that time. So I called this bookie and I went to the game, and, 2 teams I didn't care anything about. All of a sudden I cared a lot because I had money on the team and the over and the under. And of course, like Byron stated, I won both sides. And that started a long relationship with sports gambling that lasted for about 23 years. And I attended my first trip to the casino when I was 21. As soon as I turned 21, I came home broke, busted, disgusted. I remember peeling out of the parking garage. I was so angry with myself. My girlfriend was angry with me. I was angry with my buddy because he had won. He had to put gas in my tank on the way home. But I just wanted to go back the next chance I got, But back then, you kind of had to plan trips to the casinos. It'd be a couple times a year to Atlantic City, once a year to Vegas. And that was about it. So casino gambling wasn't a huge part of my story early on. It was just something I did a few times a year. But I generally left those trips pretty broke, busted, and disgusted, because if I was up, I was going to sit at the table long enough for it to be taken from me and give it right back to the casino, and that's just the way my story went, But, I think we all had our winnings, that we held on to, and we just kind of chased those feelings, we chased those feelings. And, so what happened was, I had married the love of my life, when I was working at that pub, and, I had 2 kids, a beautiful home, and everything looked great on the outside, but on the inside, I was a scared child, and like I said, that restaurant had become my identity. And in 2011, that place shut down. It went out of business, and my drinking really escalated even before it closed because we knew it was coming. The owner, who was like a godfather to me, was expressing his concerns. He was having trouble paying the bills. The rent had got it just, the overhead expenses had just gotten too great, and my alcoholism really took off to another level. So what happened was that my ex-wife saw this scared kid come out who didn't know what he was going to do. Here it is, just a restaurant shutting down, a job. I'm thinking it's the end of the world. I really did. And I was just paralyzed with fear, and alcohol was my solution at that time. So what happened was in 2012, my wife and I separated because of my alcoholism, and I managed to muster a month under my belt. They call it white knuckling in the rooms, because I didn't want anything to do with Alcoholics Anonymous. I knew they didn't want us to drink at all. I just wanted to learn, take a little break and learn to control my drinking. And I got 30 days under my belt, and my wife agreed to let me move back in as long as I quit drinking and any other substances. And I agreed to do that. And when I moved back in, all of a sudden my gambling took off to another level. I was introduced to online poker and blackjack. And again, I was a sports gambler. And remember, my life, I was going through a huge life transition, no longer having that restaurant in my life. And I started to turn to gambling as a financial solution. And one night at 4:00 in the morning, now here I just moved back into the house. I'm trying to save the marriage, keep my family together with the love of my life. And I literally was sitting at the dining room table. I remember sitting at the dining room table with my computer at family dinner, playing my poker hands. And I don't suggest that for anyone that's trying to save their marriage. And at 4:00 in the morning, the worst thing that happens to a gambler is I won this poker tournament out of like 200 and some people. And I just remember that high when you get to the final table and you're pushing all in. And when I won, I just went running through the house, screaming and yelling, woke up my kids, woke up my wife, told my wife I was going to be a professional poker player. I'd found my calling. And I went downstairs the next morning to set up to play poker. And I had this note sitting next to the computer telling me it was time to move out again. And, I really believed at that time the marriage was over. And that was right around the time that the casinos had opened in the state of Maryland. This was in the end of 2012, early 2013. And, you give a gambler that sort of attitude that they got nothing to lose. I'm thinking it's go big, go home time. I'm going to lose everything anyway. I'm losing love of my life. I'm ending up splitting everything, and same thing with Byron. I started playing uncharacteristically high amounts, and I won. I won the first couple of weeks. I thought I was going to be a professional blackjack player. I said, this is great. I get to play the game that I love for a living, and just like Byron, I found out it only takes that one bad run. It was one night in the casino. I drained all my accounts, cash advances on the card. And literally when I left there, I had absolutely no access to any money. I got myself deep in a hole. And when a gambler gets to that point, it's dangerous. They will start chasing their losses like a drug habit. And I had that voice in the back of my head, like, how else am I going to turn my life around other than to go back to that casino and try to win it back? When you get to that point, it's like, you can work, you can make some money, but it's like, I can pay this bill. I might be able to pay that bill, but how am I going to pay all these other bills? How am I going to, and on top of it, my wife and I were kind of going back and forth and talking about getting back together. I'm like, she's never going to want to get back together with me if she knows the financial mess I created. So I'm thinking my life's on the line. The only way I'm going to get that money back is by winning it back at the casino. And in the end, I chased those losses for a couple months, and in the end, I had a do or die day. And I said, if I lose, I'm killing myself, and I had everything in my car to do it. And it's the same thing. I was sitting at that table. I was up more money ever than I've been up my life, in one sitting. And but it wasn't enough for me. I had this big number in the back of my head I had to get to. And I sat there and watched all those chips vanish out from under me in less than than 30 minutes. And and I had the plan in place to take my life. And fortunately, one of our peers who actually was supposed to speak today, who's also a very close friend of mine, he called to check on me because he was a poker player at the casino. He wasn't there at the time, but he called me to see how I was doing. He knew I was in dire straits, and I just said, I'm done. I said, I'm done. And he knew exactly what I meant. So I was given a divine intervention. My uncle brought the police and they got me to a psych ward. And then I went to 5 days in Shepherd Pratt and then into a 28-day rehab program. In the 28-day rehab program, I was introduced to some very valuable resources. Michael Rosen from the center came in there, shared his story with me. He lined it up so I could go to 2 outside GA meetings while I was in rehab. So I was introduced to Alcoholics Anonymous in rehab, Gamblers Anonymous outside of rehab. And I was doing it completely to save my marriage, because my wife was telling me that we're gonna get our family back together after this. And all my counselors were saying, you can't do this for somebody else, and I didn't care enough about myself to do it for me. The way I looked at it is, if I wasn't going to keep my family together, what point is there to go on, and I'm sure my counselors knew I was setting myself up for a relapse, and that's exactly what happened. So 2 weeks out of rehab, I had surrendered over the gambling. Like, I accepted the fact that there was no chasing my losses anymore. That was over. And I didn't have any money to gamble, but I could still afford, a cheap bottle of vodka. And I pretty much came to the conclusion at that point in time that the solution was to drink myself to death, and I was going to meetings. I was going to GA and AA meetings, but I just felt like nobody understood me. Nobody understood the challenges that I faced, and fortunately I was at this small GA meeting and I wasn't sharing at any of the meetings. I was going there and leaving, period. That's all I was doing. But at this one little GA meeting in Columbia, Byron and I were there, and they go around a circle and you kind of have to share a little bit of your story. So I shared a little bit of my story, and he came up to me after the meeting and he said, "Hey man, we got real similar stories. If you ever want to talk, give me a call." So, I was back to that point of just hopeless and despair. I was going to take my life. And I said, maybe I'll give this guy a call first. And Byron was there within, I'd say, 2 hours. I was annihilated drunk. He picked me up with another alcoholic. They took me to a meeting. They took me out to dinner. And they turned that light bulb of hope on, for me. And, Byron shared, when he shared his story, I said to myself, either this guy is crazy or there's something going on in those rooms I don't know about, and Byron said, "Hey man, I don't have to live as a slave to my addictions anymore. So no matter what happens to me, I know I'm going to be okay." And I believe that, for the first time, I said, maybe this thing can work for me. And, they say in recovery, this psychic change has to occur. And that's exactly what happened for me that night. A psychic change occurred and I was given hope. So I got a sponsor, I got a home group. I started working the steps. I started getting involved, being in service, doing institutional commitments and everything they recommended. And it's like I was removed from behind this mask that I've been wearing my entire life. And that insecure child, all of a sudden I started feeling like I could pack something into the stream of life, and it's just been amazing. Recovery is an amazing fellowship of men and women, that just share their experience, strength, and hope with each other and keep each other strong, So when people call that 1-800-GAMBLER helpline number, that's all I try to do. I just try to give them help and hope. I hopefully can convince them that gambling and chasing their losses is not the answer, which is not always as easy said than done, because a gambler, they might think they're ready at the time when they make that call, but next time they get that paycheck or some money in their hands and they got bill collectors calling them, they're going to go back out. But I can tell you, there's been several times, I've warned them. I say, I know it's going to be tempting when you get your next check, not to go back and try to win back those losses, but trust me, it's going to get worse. And they might call me a week later, 2 weeks later, 2 months later, and they'll say, "Man, I wish I listened. I thought it was bad that last time I called. It's way worse now." But eventually,
they get this thing, and that's why they say it doesn't matter how far down the scale we have gone, there's always hope. So that's basically what I try to share, and any other resources I can share to get them on the road to recovery. If they need housing resources, because some of them are getting evicted or losing their homes, if they need legal aid, because some of them, like Byron, have embezzled money or, are facing, legal repercussions, if they need roadblocks like the voluntary exclusion program, GAMBAN that blocks electronic websites. We all know that, online gambling is becoming bigger and bigger. So that's a very valuable resource, and obviously introduce them to the rooms. If the 12-step fellowships is not their thing, they're not in a spiritual approach, they're smart recovery, for religious, they're celebrate recovery. Recovery is just, it's an amazing community, and once you're connected to it, you can just feel it lifting you throughout. And my goal is just to get them into the hands of the people that can help them. And the other important thing is that there's no cost treatment available in Maryland, not only for the gambler, but also for their family members. And the only requirement is they have to be a Maryland resident. We have a list of over 100 providers in the state of Maryland. We have 2 residentials, and there's no strings attached. There's a fund set up, the no cost treatment fund to the casinos. It's paid for. There's not even a copay. So we're able to refer them to a clinician that can help them as well. So there's a lot of great resources in the state of Maryland. And my goal when they call is just to get them into the right hands and inspire help and hope. So I appreciate everyone for being here with us today, and thank you for letting me share.
Thank you, Will, for sharing. Thank you, everybody, for sharing. If all the panelists would come back and join me for some questions. I just really want to say a lot of the comments are thanking everybody for their courage. We know it takes a lot to share such a personal story. Addiction comes with a lot of shame, and thank you so much for shedding light on that and being proud to be in recovery and to share your stories with other people. One of the questions, let me just start, was about attending Gam-Anon meetings. I did share with the person who asked the question the link to find a meeting. She was just asking if there's any fees, any more literature about being able to find that information.
So if they will go on gamanon.org and explore the website, they will find in-person meetings, they will find Zoom meetings. A wonderful thing because of the pandemic has been that the International Service Office has allowed us to do meetings on Zoom. So we have people from all over the country in meetings all over, or people from out of the country. So it's all there. The literature that is there, there's a way to purchase the literature, and yeah.
Okay, this one's a little long. I'm just going to read. Thank you so much for your candor and sharing your testimony. Ellen, your message of hope is loud and clear, but what would you say was the evidence you received from Gam-Anon that supported your willingness to continue to go back, considering your prior experience with the first treatment program that you entrusted with your son? And then there's the second part to that. Yeah.
Okay, I didn't necessarily continue to go back because I thought they were going to offer me recovery. I went because everything we had tried, we were over our heads. We didn't know, everything we had tried didn't work. And I went there because what did I have to lose? I certainly didn't expect to find recovery. I thought they were, I didn't know, talking through their heads or something. I just continued. And then the big light bulb went off when I saw myself as an enabler.
Yeah. What would you, and I probably for the group too, but what would you suggest clinicians or programs emphasize to successfully reach and encourage hope and participation from others who may benefit from the 12-step support?
Me?
Anybody really. Yeah, because I mean, this was directed towards you, but I mean, really, I mean, I think all of us as clinicians, we rely on the people that have been there to teach us a little bit too about how to encourage hope and support from others.
I,
you know, they'll,
I,
oh, go ahead, Ellen.
I think if you can find a therapist who is trained in gambling problems, I think that's great. I'm done. Will, it's yours.
I think they were asking so how they would encourage some. All I was going to say is, you know, in the rooms we always hear, you know, they say stick around long enough and you'll hear your story. So if I was a clinician, I would encourage them. You're going to find people there, and eventually you're going to hear someone that has real similar stories, real similar circumstances. It might not be exactly the same, but try to relate in, not relate out. You know, I was relating out early on. Everybody else was different. Nobody understood me. And thank God I met Byron that had such similar, you know, such similar story and circumstances. But they always say, stick around long enough and you'll hear your story. So that might be a way of encouraging them.
Yeah, Will, I want to thank Will and Ellen. I'm so proud to be on a panel with you guys, and your experiences are so awesome. I recall a clinician the first day that I entered recovery, who did exactly what I needed them to do. Now, I don't know whether this is recommended, right? So I'm just giving you my experience. But I ran into a clinician at a hospital, in an emergency room in the psych ward, who really spent a lot of time describing for me the hopelessness of my situation, right? That the way I was doing things wasn't going to work. He described to me the hopelessness of my addiction to alcohol, my addiction to substances, and my addiction to gambling, that there was no outcome that was going to be positive from pursuing those things. And he also described the hopelessness that said, you know, more likely than not, you're not going to get well, but here are some resources, right? It was almost like a challenge. And I don't know whether that works for everybody, but it worked for them. It worked for this problem gambler, right? You told me I couldn't do something. I'm going to try it. But I think that the truth, honesty is a real pillar of recovery. And he was the first person who looked me dead in my eye and told me the truth about my recovery and the truth about my addiction, and that there was really only one way out. And that was through doing something different than what I had been doing that up to that point. So I think honesty is really important for clinicians when you're looking face to face at somebody who's up to that point been unable and incompetent to be able to deal with the truth. So that helped me a lot. Thanks.
Thank you. Will, what would you suggest for those who have rationalized that 12-step programs do not work?
I mean, they say it all the time in the rooms, just keep coming back, you know, just keep coming back. And like I said, eventually you do end up hearing your story and you end up relating in. And it's like a light bulb goes on. But like I said, you know, for some people, the spiritual approach, you know, the 12-step approach is not for them. You know, we're trained as peers. We have to keep an open mind that there are, you know, other avenues to recovery, you know, and sometimes some people want the one-on-one with the clinician, or they find it in the churches, or they find it in Smart Recovery or some other means. But like Byron said, they just got to change it up. You know, they got to try something different, and they're going to have to replace those old habits with some new good habits, because if in those old associations with some new associations, otherwise I don't think recovery is going to be likely. I know for me, if I hadn't replaced those old associations with the new associations I have in my life today, I would have gone back to the old associations, and I know exactly where they would have taken me.
So I have two more questions at least I want to get to. One of them is about what can be done about combating the stigma of seeking help. And really, this is for anybody.
So I'll take this one on. I think the first thing is that, you know, we have some policy considerations. I'm going to speak. This is not an attack on anyone, but we have some policy considerations that differ between substance use disorder and disordered gambling, right? If you even look at the federal sentencing guidelines, there is a portion of the federal sentencing guidelines that explicitly details that judges cannot take into consideration for downward departures in sentencing because of gambling addiction. Now, there are other portions of the sentencing guidelines, and the sentencing guidelines is a huge book. There's other portions that have given judges a little bit more leeway, but the fact that that is explicitly listed on the sentencing guidelines in federal court is a problem, right? You're already setting that aside from other disorders of this type, other mental diseases, acknowledged mental diseases of this type. You're setting gambling aside for some reason. And it's very difficult to find in the legislative history why they've done that. But it's things like that. Like, we have to talk more about what this disease looks like. We have to talk more about what it does to the brain. We have to talk more about some of the things that Victor was talking about in the beginning, that, you know, there are some social determinants that make people more vulnerable to this disease. Although that's not the only determinant, because that wasn't my experience, but we have to do a much better job in helping people understand that this is not just a moral failing. This is not greed. This is a disease. This is a disease that once it strikes you, it's not going to get any better unless you have intervention. And in my instance, as I stated, unless there's a we around me. I'm pretty certain that I'm never going to take a drink or a drug, right? Irrespective of what happens. There's still a little sign in the back of my head that tells me that gambling is my solution to my financial problems. I don't do anything about it because I have a we. I have people like Will in my life. I have people like Ellen in my life. I have a large group of people who surround me and keep me sane. But there's still that little voice in my head that still rings out occasionally. And this is a disease. I haven't participated in the objects of my addiction for 9 years, and it still crosses my mind, right? This is a disease. And the only cure to this disease is a we. So we have to talk more about what it feels like to be a problem gambler, what it actually feels like to live with this disease, to help people understand that it's not something that's just a moral failing, but it's something that really rings in the brains of the addict.